Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Erica Wagner. I'm the literary editor of The Times, and I'm delighted to be here this evening with my friend David Nicholls. My friend Jill Waters, a radio producer, rang me to tell me about a novel she was abridging for Book at Bedtime. She said it was called One Day, and it was by David Nicholls, and had a very similar experience, I'm sure, to one that you all have had, of being completely swept away by a book that simply wouldn't let you go, and whose characters stay in your head long after you've finished the tale. And the film of One Day, directed by Lorna Scherfig, and with a fine script by David himself, has just been making a splash at a cinema near you. And it's film, of course, that we're here to talk about tonight. This evening, however, we're going to talk about one of David's true passions as part of this wonderful French Passions series, and that passion is for the films of François Truffaut.
I think François Truffaut is the name, when I heard it over the years that followed, was because it was French and therefore foreign. I imagined that Truffaut's films, I worked out that he was a director, and I imagined his films would be very, very difficult, very inaccessible. I had completely the wrong response to A Bout de Souffle. I felt that it was arty and impenetrable and difficult, and I think this was a prejudice I had through my teens towards most foreign cinema, which I imagined to be arty and pretentious. And yet seeing 400 Blows a little after that, and then Day for Night, and then some of the other films, I really fell in love with him as a director. I think he's incredibly humane, incredibly warm, incredibly funny, incredibly versatile, a very literate director, a very passionate director. And I've become a huge fan, especially in the last 10 years, especially with respect to the Antoine Doinel films, the four full-length films and short film that he made about this character played by Jean-Pierre Léaud. The interview with Hitchcock, the long interviews that he carried out in 1966, which are wonderful, really incredibly readable, incredibly engaging, and they tell you as much about Truffaut as they do about Hitchcock. And Hitchcock talks about Hitchcock's school of filmmaking very much believes that cinema is about images, that you should be able to take away the soundtrack of a film and the film should still make sense, that you should be able to tell a story in pictures, and if you can't, then there's something wrong with the story. And with Truffaut, that's clearly not the case. His films are incredibly verbal. He uses a great deal of voiceover. Most of his 26 films are adaptations. There is clearly an influence from Hitchcock, but it doesn't always come out in the most obvious ways. It's often in the love stories. And most of Truffaut's films are love stories in a direct or indirect way. But Hitchcock is definitely there, along with lots of other directors that Truffaut admired, Renoir in particular, and Jean Vigo. He was a provocateur, and he was constantly slagging off traditional French cinema, claiming that it aped the worst of Hollywood, that it was sumptuous and empty, that it was artificial, that it was studio-based, that film should be drawn from the lives of the director, that the director should be at the center of film art, and that film should be shot on location, that they should avoid artifice, that they should be made cheaply, that they should be collaborative. He and the rest of the French New Wave formed a sort of repertory company. They'd assistant direct on each other's films, they'd write each other's scripts, they'd give notes on each other's scripts. And Truffaut was absolutely at the heart of this. Godard went to see Day for Night, La Nuit Américaine, and wrote this letter. Yesterday I saw La Nuit Américaine. Probably no one else will call you a liar, so I will. This is Truffaut's reply to Jean-Luc Godard. Jean-Luc, so you won't be obliged to read this unpleasant letter right to the end. I'm starting with the essential point. I will not co-produce your film. The idea that Truffaut was always the new wave director that the Americans embraced, and there are many attempts to get Truffaut to direct American films. He was approached to direct Bonnie and Clyde. He was approached to direct Kramer versus Kramer, which in many ways is a film that's clearly very much influenced by Truffaut himself, and it would have been interesting to know what Truffaut would have made of both of those films. But he was always held back, I think, partly by, whilst he respected American cinema very much, no great desire to work in American cinema, and also his inability to speak English well enough to feel confident of his filmmaking in America. If you read Truffaut's own writing, he says that the attitude to adaptation in most films is that people, they take the book and they kind of take out all the dialogue and they turn the book into a play and they film the play. And Jules Legime isn't like that at all. You know, there's a great deal of voiceover. If he likes a descriptive passage or a passage which describes the character's emotions, he just has it spoken over the top of the film. It's a kind of cut and paste approach to adaptation, and I think that's in many ways a much more sensible approach to film, rather than just kind of copying out the dialogue and hoping that the actors will convey the inner thoughts and the character's development, which is the usual approach. Now, I've never approached a book like that. I've certainly, you know, moved things around and cut and pasted and reallocated dialogue, but with a novel like Great Expectations, which is so plot-driven, is so beautifully structured itself, it doesn't feel appropriate.
Well, I think we would all agree, David, that you've been very eloquent this evening. And so I thank you very much. We all thank you. I should say, before you give him a tremendous round of applause, David will be signing books.
I will.
Out front.
And thank you so much for coming. I'm not a film critic or academic, and so I've been incredibly nervous about this, but it's a great honor to be at the French Institute. I woke at 3 a.m. I had a sort of waking nightmare that I'd have to do this in French. And I'm pleased that hasn't been the case, but thank you very much for coming. I'm amazed to see so many people here. Thank you.